But if you have something that's starting to turn a positive culture into a negative culture, it's really important to address that immediately, even if it means somebody has to go. The people who were bought into the culture will start to question whether or not we're headed in the right direction because we're allowing this culture disruption to continue. And if you're really not careful, what can happen is the people who were the ones that were really championing your culture and making things work will say, okay, maybe I should go. It's Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Jaime, and we are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries.
Consider it your weekly companion on a path to better work and a better way of working.
In 2004, the Detroit Pistons beat the star-stacked Lakers in the NBA Finals. On paper, right, they had no business winning. But the Pistons had something the Lakers did not. Was it culture? Was it the team identity? Was it a way that they worked together that somehow made five guys greater than, the sum of their parts? That same dynamic plays out in business every day. So the question is culture an advantage? Is it the ultimate advantage? Is it even real? Or is it just a story that we're telling ourselves? You and I talk a lot about culture when we get on the phone, when we get on a call. It seems to kind of drift into a lot of the conversations we have, even if we're like in the weeds of a project or something, or we're just frankly blowing off steam because something's, overflowing in our world. But I gotta just maybe start at the top. When we say culture, what are we actually talking about?
It's a super interesting topic, and I think there are some polarization here. I think you have different schools of thought. Really, I think when we're talking about culture, we're really looking at, to your point, are we talking about the greater than the sum of the parts and the ability to achieve higher than maybe, people say punching above your weight class. You'll hear that term a lot too, right? Which is like, can I kind of achieve more than what it would seem like I should be able to do with the ingredients I have, versus purely betting on talent, right? If I grab a bunch of A players and put them in a room or on a team or wherever they might be, that they're going to achieve great things just because they're all talented at what they do. And I think, it's a mix of, there's leadership style, there's the permission to operate in a particular role, and that we're like, we are going to achieve a goal. That's why we're here. And that everybody's aligned with that, and they're pulling the rope in the same direction. When they show up, everybody knows what the outcome is that we're trying to do. There's not a lot of uncertainty in what's happening, and there's some connected tissue between all the parts versus, let's say, a whole bunch of silos where everybody's doing work. And I think when we talk culture and chemistry, and there's a lot of words we throw around that might indicate that things fit together in a way that's organic and interesting and compelling, versus everybody just saying, I know exactly what my role is here, and that's kind of all that matters. I'm going to do my thing, and everybody else will figure out what to do from there, and that will all come together nicely and will produce great things. It's hard to put a fine point on it. It's hard to be like put key performance indicators around things like that. Sometimes it's a vibe on how people feel. But I think if you are the kind of person who goes into the office every day, when you go home, if you've got a winning culture or not. It feels that way. You feel it, right? Do I feel valued? Do I feel like I matter? Do I feel like my teammates care about me and I care about them? When something falls down, we all pick each other up. Those kinds of things. It feels good. And I think we would say that's when things are feeling really good, things are really humming. You might say culture is driving that. There's brands that have their own culture. There's organizations who inherently have built culture. When you go in there, you fit into their culture. It's part of their interview process. It's like, hey, is this person a fit? Like, do they fit our culture? I don't know. We want to make sure they fit here. The alternative to that is, say, talent wins all day long. We're a talent league. We're a talent industry. We are a talent organization. Give me the highest pedigree. Give me the best resume. Give me the highest output person, and give me enough of those. I'll win every time. It doesn't matter if they like me as a boss. It doesn't matter if they like each other. It doesn't matter if they like working here. We will win because they're getting paid a lot of money and they're super good at it.
I mean, obviously there is a whole lot there to unpack. And I think, frankly, that's one of the traps of the word culture, right? When you start having these conversations, especially when you're having them with, I think, senior leadership, it's almost like everyone knows it's important. They know it's important because it's been said a whole bunch. And frankly, everything you just said, they know at some level is true. But it's kind of hard to get your arms around it, right? Because there's a lot of pieces of that. So oftentimes I feel like you got people approaching that topic from a bunch of different directions, which all might be totally correct, but it can make the concept overwhelming. So I know, from my point of view, and disclosure, I am not a doctor. I do not give medical advice. I don't take this as medical advice. Like, I'm a big fan of when words have double meanings, right? Or like homophones, things like that. So when I think of the word culture, I literally think of, what am I growing in a petri dish in a lab? I mean, that's a culture, right? Like, I like my son last week. I had to take him to the Minute Clinic, to go have a throat swab done because he sore throat. Let's see if it's strep throat. They swabbed the throat, put it in a vial, and we have a culture. Like, that visual for me, for my brain, is helpful, because really what we're saying is, I'm going to go introduce this little agent into a dish that has a bunch of other things kind of swimming around in it, and we're going to see what happens. That is the culture. So if we're talking about that, in my mind, that visual has always been helpful. It's trying to say, well, we're talking about all of the ingredients in the stew. Some of those ingredients are, they're spreadsheets and they're instruction manuals, and they have hard edges around things, or whether it's process or just kind of how we do things. But there's also a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into the petri dish, and it all bumps into each other, and it spends all day bumping into each other. And I think the point that at least I have always tried to keep in mind is, if you are a leader, you're somebody who's building a thing, trying to lead a thing, you have influence on what goes into that petri dish. And you should be putting real cycles on doing intentional things with your ability to add things into that petri dish. And I got to say, I think an even more succinct, really distilled way of describing it that has always stuck with me comes from Seth Godin. It's an incredibly effective definition for culture that is hard for me to shake. And that is, culture is simply, hey, people like us do things like this. So that's the definition of culture through the lens of people who love hip hop, or people who love tennis, or people who are showing up at insert large tech company trying to accomplish or build or ship this thing, is being able to look around, and it's that two-parter. People like us. Well, who's the us? Well, it's here, this person to my left, this person to my right. That's the people like us. Do things like this. Well, what are we trying to do? If you can sit there and kind of wrap that around anything in your own world that you might be working on or a part of, or you're building, that is a way of acknowledging and kind of defining culture in my mind. I mean, I don't know if any of that resonates with you or if that causes a reaction, but that's sort of what sticks with me.
Yeah, it's I think when you frame it like that, one of the things that pops out to me too is that culture isn't always good. There's bad culture, right? Like, I think we could all argue that or even have stories of, like, yeah, I've seen examples of bad culture at play, which does align a little bit to the petri dish model, right? Because we don't know exactly what's going to happen when all these things kind of coalesce, like when they're all together and there's an active ingredient maybe inspiring some activity there. Sometimes the outcome is bad. We use, oftentimes in business, we use culture as just a purely positive thing. Like, we need to build culture here. Okay, sure. But what do we have now? Do we have bad culture? Like, maybe that's what we need to change our culture, right? We need to go from this culture to this culture, which is more positive for us. And so there's the us part, which I think is important about what you said too. When you have positive culture and everybody's moving in the right direction, in the same direction, and they all understand what the goal is, you say us and we a lot. When you don't have that, you hear a lot of I and me, right? Which is, I am doing this. This is mine. My goal is this. And when you see team chemistry working in a positive way, you see a lot more, we need to do this, we're good at this, we're trying to do this, we're trying to accomplish this. And those are some indicators, but you could probably even draw some analogies of, like, well, who's the dish in the culture? Like, who is the goo in the culture? Who's the agent that was just introduced, or what is that? Like, in some ways, even the way you describe it, not to lean too hard into the analogy, but it's a controlled environment in some ways, right? We know exactly what agent we're introducing into what thing. You wouldn't do that same study by saying, I'm going to set this petri dish outside for a couple of days and I'm going to go introduce an agent, see what happens, and draw a bunch of conclusions, because it's totally contaminated now, right? And in a business, it can kind of work that way too, or any organization, where if you think you have a controlled environment and you're trying to introduce culture and you don't, you might have a whole bunch of side effects that you didn't even anticipate, or end up with a quote unquote bad culture, right? It's toxic. You hear that. So when we talk about culture, in a lot of ways, you could argue that there's culture everywhere, but the kind of culture that produces unexpected positive results, or what might seem unattainable for the ingredients that you have, that's when things get really interesting. which is saying my goal as a leader is to introduce positive culture in a way that allows this team to outperform what it looks like it should be able to do. And that's where the magic is, I think. But it does start with the environment and the what level of control of that environment you have in a positive way. And it does in a lot of ways, I think, come from the top, which is that if your leadership does not embrace team chemistry and positive culture vibes as a way to punch above your weight class, let's say, and it's a my way or the highway, or it's very prescriptive, do this, and I hired you to do this, so go do this, and I'll tell you what to do, and I'll tell you the outcome I expect to happen. That can be a very different dynamic in the sense of like, well, okay, like what are we trying to accomplish here?
Something you just said also just reminded me that the inverse is also true. Culture being something that can be designed for, or at least, thought about designing for to a degree, which is, by the way, if you don't do any of that, it won't not exist. It will grow anyway. And if you don't market or choose to participate in the designing of a culture, you're going to end up with one anyway. And it might not be the one that you want or need, or if you don't even buy into the fact that it's a force to begin with, you might find yourself in a situation where that type of really dangerous, unpredictable, chaotic, insert bad word type of culture is driving the bus more than you even are aware of. So anyway, so it makes you think of that you're going to end up with one, whether you like it or not, which I guess if I kind of have to zoom out a little bit, is sort of assuming that leaders, builders, people who are trying to build and ship meaningful work, sort of like step one is, do you even acknowledge it's a force to begin with? Because I feel like there's a whole class of people that just don't. Which is wild to me, because it's almost like saying gravity, I'm not convinced. Like, I'm not convinced that gravity is like real yet. It's similar in some respects, where step one is you got to kind of buy into the fact that it exists in the first place. And if you're maybe there, then we can kind of talk about how we might be able to design for it and all the value that kind of drops out the bottom of it potentially. So I guess maybe going back to like the Pistons story, right? In your mind, what do you think that was for them? Like, what do you think specifically in the context of I'm trying to build a team to go achieve the unimaginable in basketball? How'd that work for them, from your point of view?
This one's really interesting, I think, because of who the opponent was, right? We actually have a similar example that just happened this year, where you had like two kind of chemistry focused teams competing for the championship. Setting that aside, the Pistons Lakers was super interesting because you had polar opposites. This was a great example of, I'm either going to bet on top end talent, or I'm going to bet on positive culture to achieve the goal that I want. And you could argue there was a level of success for both of those because they were the last two teams standing. Both worked to the point where it got you to the final moment where you're going to win or lose. And one of the unique things about the NBA, I think, is usually the best team wins because you're playing a 7-game series. It's not one and done where some weird fluky thing and then it's over, right? I mean, those guys won 4-1. It was definitive. The best team won, and they won by a lot. If you look at that very closely, you say, all right, well, the Lakers had Shaq and they had Kobe in their prime. What else do you need if you're a basketball team? You might think, I also have maybe the greatest coach of all time coaching this team in Phil Jackson, right? Who did it 6 times with Michael Jordan in his team, right? Like, okay, this is the ingredients. But I challenge anybody to really remember who else was on that team. Yeah, Phil coached and, Shaq and Kobe played, and those guys were as good as it possibly gets at the thing that they did. Do the other 13 guys even matter? Maybe not. Like, as long as we have enough actual members to fill the roles that we need, then that team should win, because those are maybe the 2 best players in the whole league. And then who cares? Fill in whatever else behind them. And I'll say on the other side, if you look closely at the Pistons, no real superstars on that team. There's nobody in there that would have won a league MVP, right? Chauncey won the finals MVP as the point guard, who literally never had a season in his career where he was the best point guard in the NBA, or even probably close to that. And you look at all the other players on that team, and they're all very, very good at the positions they're in. All the bench players are very good at the positions they're in. And everybody knows what their role is and how important they are to the team and to the team's need to win. And I would question in that example, If you were to go to the 13th guy on that Pistons roster and say, how valuable do you feel as part of this team that won the championship? I would argue they probably feel quite valued. My teammates respected me. They trusted me. I was ready when I was called on. I did all the things I was supposed to do. And I feel like I was a core ingredient in this team winning the championship. And if you go to the 13th guy on the Lakers team and say, how valuable do you feel on the fact that this team made it to the finals? They were like, dude, I barely played. If I was in there, I just had to get the ball to Shaq and Kobe and let them do their thing. And that was my job, was just stay out of the way. let the good guys do what they're supposed to do. And it's a great example of two very, very different philosophies of team construction trying to chase the ultimate goal of a championship win and building it totally different. One betting purely on top end talent, the other saying, if I have the right people in the right roles who understand what they're supposed to do and their teammates trust them and their coaches trust them and the organization trusts them, they can beat anybody. And they did.
Yeah. Obviously, you and I we were not there. We weren't sitting on the sidelines. We weren't in the locker room. We didn't participate in the team meetings. But I do think it's probably reasonable to extend everything you were just describing to a fine point in saying there is clearly value if you are leading an organization or a team in putting effort into defining roles, not over investing in what might be construed as just talent or the all-star or however you want to kind of classify that individual or that particular skill, in showing up every day, making sure you are delivering a consistent message to the entire team about what you're trying to accomplish and why every individual's role has meaning. Besides the fact that you're doing a great job of just painting a clear picture as somebody who is leading and planning and trying to, set the table, I would imagine, to your point, that 13th man goes home at the end of the day and sits down with his family or by himself and has dinner and probably feels pretty good about his situation in life, right? We're participating in something that probably is fulfilling at a deeper level than just I'm chasing the particular thing that I've been assigned to go chase, right? Because now we're getting into the weeds of talking about what motivates us as humans, what ultimately ends up being fulfilling, in how we spend our time and where we apply effort to different things in our lives, is this undercurrent of purpose and the why behind a thing. And I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't all acknowledge that we are all seeking that at some level, some deeper version of purpose and why am I doing a particular thing. And we don't have to zoom all the way out into some big heady concept around that. But as leaders and builders, it's probably worth acknowledging that if you have something in your head that you can see, an outcome that you're trying to achieve, all of that storytelling that you're doing to yourself is probably worth getting out of your head and socializing amongst, the organization or the team and figuring out how to either in community or with the help of your lieutenants or whatever, figure out how to shape that story in a way that can be packaged up and shared so that it's useful. Or at least that's what I'm hearing in the context of some of what, your remarks are about knowing your role and value throughout the entire chain of command.
For people listening, there's a couple different ways you can receive this. If you're the one leading folks to the ultimate goal, whatever that might be, you have to take a look at what your options are across your team, how you're building your team, making sure you have a shared vision. People understand like what is expected of me and making sure that communication has happened. Not what I'm told to do, but like what's expected of me and how's that line up with what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about, and how do we kind of tug on that a little bit. And then making sure that people feel heard and feel valued and that I have a voice in the room. It doesn't mean everything I say gets put into production, but I got heard and I share experiences with my teammates and we all understand the vision. We could all recite it back to each other. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do this. And this is my part in this. And I'm satisfied with my part in this. I'm not jealous of the person who gets to do the presentation in the boardroom. I'm not jealous of the person who gets to start, at the beginning of the game, because I know the best thing for our team is to have those people doing those things because they're really good at it. And I do the thing I'm really good at. And everybody's doing that together. That's going to get us to the finish line faster and maybe with a better outcome. And yet, if I'm on the other side of that, I'm a team member and I see that I don't have this great experience. I don't come to work every day invigorated. I don't go home feeling like that went super great. I'm just so stoked about how much closer we are to this goal now. It's hard sometimes to feel like you can impart change on that part of in the organization, because you're like, okay, well, I'm one person on the team who wants this, and I don't want to feel bad when I go home at work. I don't want to feel bad when I'm on my way to work in the morning. I don't want to feel like what am I doing here? What, they don't value me, or all these other things. Aligning with your team to make sure, like, you can take the reins a little bit and be like, okay, what are we all doing here? Like, what do we, can we all agree what we're trying to accomplish? Do we even know what we're all trying to do? Like, am I working in a silo? Am I throwing things over the fence, or am I part of a team?
You and I have spent a lot of time doing laps around managing, let's just pick software engineers as an example. What it's like to be somebody who shows up, and even some of the most wonderful engineers we've worked with, a lot of times that can be a cohort that is really, really hoping you show up with the instruction manual. They're really hoping you show up with the spec and going, here's what it is. And by the way, it's maybe just this one little focused piece. But we also know what it's like to work with engineers who, sure, they understand that they have a role to play in that specific, item, that deliverable, but they're also realizing that their value is in their ability to kind of look up and go, well, how does my thing slot into the bigger thing? It's sort of like just a general curiosity that extends beyond the spec. And that's super valuable, right? Because that might be a very tactical way, if you were just a part of a team, to start poking at some of that stuff as how do I get to culture? And maybe nobody showed up for my onboarding and said, here is the culture, like here is the manual. And if they didn't do that, but you're still trying to tease out what it might be, maybe there's something to that where, well, one way to do it is to show up and just kind of be curious. Maybe the thing that you worked on today does fit into a larger thing. And who are the people that you might be at either arm's length away from, or maybe it requires you to, dig a little bit deeper or stretch a little bit further? Who might have that information? Who might be willing to help you, see a little bit more clearly how you slot in? I think maybe as a team member, a starting point that can be helpful is just kind of be curious in the first place. Challenge somebody else on the team, regardless of what their role or title is, to maybe help you see around your particular task or your particular corner. If for no other reason that maybe that other person goes, you know what, that's a great question. I haven't really thought about that. I mean, that also might send you down an interesting path.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the pieces I think that falls out of that is why? Why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? Why is he doing this? Why is she doing this? Like if I don't understand why, it's really hard to be aligned with my team and that we're all chasing this goal together in our individual roles. And in some cases, that's a real indicator of what kind of culture you have of the team that you're on. Are people rewarded with asking why, or are they punished for asking why?
Exactly.
Right? Because if I say why, because I don't understand why we're doing this, and somebody gives me the my way or the highway type of a response, I'm not going to be inclined to do my best at that thing because I don't even know why I'm doing it in the first place, right? And we see that with engineers too, with every discipline, frankly. But the engineer who says, yeah, tell me where to put the button and where it goes, cool, I'll do that. The person who goes like, wait, why are we putting the button this here? Like, does this person even want to do this? And you're like, you know what? I don't know if they do. Okay, we need to understand why we're doing this. And now everybody feels like, okay, I know why I'm doing this. I know why the customer is doing this. I know why as a business we're doing this. I feel empowered to do this as good as I can because I actually believe in the outcome we've prescribed here. And now I feel valued, and now I feel part of the team, and now I feel like we're all, we're winning together. We're certainly trying to.
That's right.
I think why is an interesting indicator in culture, because if I don't know why and nobody tells me why, it's going to be really hard for me to feel good about what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand, okay, I'm on the bench. Why am I on the bench? Just sit on the bench. Okay, well, now I'm unhappy.
That's right.
Because I don't understand this at all.
The bench sucks.
I think those are interesting dynamics, as you can see. Like they're little indicators you can kind of tell yourself, like, how do I kind of measure my culture here? If you ask why in a big meeting or a team meeting that you're part of, and you get kind of shot down as being like, why is Jaime asking why? This is stupid.
Yep.
Oh, okay, so I'm undervalued in this room. I get it now.
Mm-hmm. Or it's crickets or whatever. Again, that to go all the way back to the whole, people like us do things like this, and that being a defining kind of pillar of culture, that is worth marking if you are a part of an organization or you are building or leading an organization. That room, that scenario you just described, that is a signal. And you got to probably take a concerted look at what type of signals exist in and around your organization in situations like that, or other places, obviously, because that is communicating, hey, this is how we do things around here. And that's another great way to kind of tie it back to how can I define culture? Well, culture is this is kind of how we do things around here. And sometimes those are not explicit, they are inferred based on all these little interactions. And that's, that kind of theme of, hey, even if you don't design your culture on purpose, it's still there. I mean, that's gonna occur. It's sort of gonna chip away. You said a couple other things in that which stuck out to me. One, which is let's just acknowledge not everybody's going to be curious, and that's okay. You don't need to win over everybody. Nobody wins. In fact, nobody wins over everybody, and that's part of the process here. Is certainly for people in leadership positions and people who are building teams, guiding teams, is definitely get yourself out of that headspace of I got to win everybody over, because you don't and you can't, and that's okay. But what you should be focused on perhaps is really looking for the few, the few who kind of get the message, and over investing in those folks, over investing in your ability to tell that story repeatedly over time about what you're trying to achieve and why, because that's often all you really need. And that's okay. We have to accept that some people do show up and say, hey, I am just frankly significantly more comfortable. What I get out of my work life that is fulfilling is to kind of work from the manual. Give me the instructions, just that's fine. And we need people like that, and that's a-okay. It's definitely a trap, I think, for leaders to think that you got to go in and like just win everybody over, and the big speech and the all hands is going to come. It's not, and that's okay. Don't worry about that. But use those moments, right, to try to identify like, oh, who's leaning in, who kind of like whose ears like perked up, who stuck around after the thing and asked me like, oh, okay, those are interesting.
I was talking to a team very recently, and this team had high goals of what they want to achieve, but it hadn't really have a plan of how to go do it exactly yet, right? Other than just like we need to do this thing. And building out the roles and responsibilities and all of the various deliverables and all these things that have to come out of it. One of the things that we kind of really leaned into is like once we know what all the various tasks are that would be done, there's kind of like three buckets of those tasks. You're going to have tasks where people are like really passionate about. I want to do that. That's exactly the thing I love to do. I'd give me as much of that as you can. I'll do all those things. That gets me excited and I'm stoked about it. And then there's another bucket, which is I may not know, I may not be an expert at this thing, but I'm interested in it and I'm curious and I want to be part. If there's somebody who's good at this and I can run with them, I want to develop that skill. I want to be that. And then you're gonna I really hate doing that. And in fact, I don't. If I never did that again in the rest of my life, I'd be super happy with that. And if you understand that and where every kind of thing fits, it's very interesting to see how fast a team can kind of grab the right things in the right places. And you've got people who are leaning into the things they're most passionate about and most curious about are the tasks they're working on. And what you see is people move faster. People are more iterative. They're more collaborative. They're hot. They feel more valued. They were able to contribute to that process, right? Which is like, oh, someone didn't just show up and say, hey, Jaime, I need you to make a 63-page PowerPoint in 2 days, and I want you to do it on this thing. And I need that on my desk, by Friday. And you're like, man, I don't even really do PowerPoints. I don't know why you gave me this task, and now I've got to go scramble around to do this. I'm probably not going to be super happy about it. Versus if I know who actually loves doing that and is actually really good at it, and I've had a chance to understand that, I'm going to go to that person and they're going to be like, cool, I got it. I Friday morning, be in your box. You got it. You got everything you need. And all of those people felt good about that, right? And it's because we took the time to understand, like, you're going to have your role player you mentioned. Give me the instruction manual. I'm good. Great. Now I know what role you're playing. When we get to that point where all we just need execution by the book, he's going to put his head down and go for it and be super happy that it wasn't in the big idea meeting. Who's like, I don't really need to be part of that meeting. Like, don't put me up on the whiteboard. That's not my thing. Give me the task. As long as I understand what I'm trying to do and what's the expected goal, point me in the right direction, I'm gonna go. And it's right person in the right place, exhibiting the skills that they want to hone or that they're already really good and passionate about. That's when you see that force multiplier start to happen, where it's not just this prescriptive task allocation by, yeah, you have this role, so you should be able to do this and you should love it. Go. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to grind this out. And I don't know why. And I don't know why they picked me. And I don't even know why I'm doing this, but I will because I'm being paid. So I'm going to go do this thing. But my satisfaction level is down and my vibes are down and my willingness to go above and beyond aren't there because I don't know what above and beyond even means because I don't understand the why in the first place.
No, that's really good stuff. I had never really thought about kind of classifying, types of work. the way that you just described, but that's 100% the definition of, hey, there's loads of value, whether you are the one leading the team and trying to shape the thing, or you are the part of the team and going through the exercise of defining roles. And it doesn't need to sound that hardcore, even. It's just more being willing to have clear eyes around skills and responsibilities and areas of interest and that kind of underlying DNA that any individual or team as a whole brings to the project, to the goal, to the thing you're trying to achieve. So we've established, I mean, it's the same thing with the Pistons, right? You're 13th man. You knew when you showed up that you had a role. And then you can get into dissecting the types of roles if you want to. But step one, let's acknowledge that culture is a real force, that it exists. Step two, that means it impacts what we do, just like gravity does. But the opportunity we have as builders or leaders is that we can influence culture, we can shape it, we can design for it. Step three is there are a few tactical things that can go into that soup. One of them is let's do a roles assessment. Let's be real honest with ourselves and each other around the skills we bring to the table, the things we're curious about, and how that might slot in to the collective group that's trying to achieve a thing. Which frankly totally still works for independent builders and creators. If you're some solo entrepreneur, if you're, a team of one trying to do a thing, culture still means you have to be telling yourself a story every day that you get up to go work on your thing, that you are the kind of person who does things like that. But some of that kind of psychic value by going through those exercises is what allows you as an individual to have gas in the tank, to have energy to show up the next day and the next day and the next day. Those resources will get depleted pretty quick, right? And we've seen that when some of those key culture ingredients are missing, it's really hard to ask a team to stretch a little further. Real hard to ask them to work the overnight, to go the extra thing, whatever the metaphor is. That gets difficult when there's not a lot of energy left to do it. And some of the value of investing in building culture is that it is a renewable source of energy for the team or the individual to continue to do the work.
100%. And I think, so whether you're a team of one or a team of hundreds or thousands or whatever it might be, understanding why is so important. It's amazing how often it's not there. Like, why are we doing this? Well, because someone told us to do it. Well, okay, that's just unacceptable, right? Like, that's not a good reason to motivate people. If someone wants this, someone in the company said we're going to do this, and now we're just going to do it. It feels overly prescriptive. It devalues the team and what they bring to the table. It takes away, any kind of conversation around might there be a better outcome if we all put our heads together and worked on this. I think sometimes what happens, and I've seen this across many organizations, is they don't even understand how disruptive in a negative way that can be to go into a team of people who all have skills and passions and say, we're doing this and that's it. Like, go do this thing. And when you have the conversation, which starts usually with, we have a problem that we're trying to solve. And the people who need it solved are these people. But we're not really exactly sure what the right solution is, but we know that this team can help us get there. Let's all put all our ideas on the table and figure out the right plan forward. And there still is leadership. There still are role players. There might be stars or stars in the making on those teams. But it really started with, we're going to figure out what the right reason is to go do these things and what the right outcome needs to be as a team. We're all on board. When I say this, and I say this to teams all the time, right? This doesn't mean that everybody's idea gets put in, right? Like, just because you had an idea doesn't mean it gets included because you're part of this team. But it means you got heard. And your idea was part of the process. And it was stacked up against all the other ideas and challenging it against all the people we're solving this problem for. And the team comes out and says, this is the best path forward. We're going to do these things in this order, and we're all going to lean in, and we're going to distribute the work in the way that everybody's super stoked about it. And we're all going to go out here and we're going to solve this problem for these people. And we all understand what our role is. We all understand why we're doing it. And we all understand why we are doing the task that we're doing. And we subscribe to that. And maybe my idea didn't get picked up. Maybe it was at the bottom of the list. Maybe it's in the backlog or the roadmap somewhere. Cool. At least I know that I wasn't just like, hey, Jaime, you're not the idea guy. You do when we tell you to do. And it devalues a lot of folks when you're just like, man, I've got ideas too. I'm involved in this process. I know who these customers are. I know what the outcome is that we're trying to achieve. And yet I have no voice in the room. That's weird. Like I don't feel like I'm part of anything, right? I'm just a cog in the machine that's expected to do a task. And for leaders, like that's your way in. When your team feels like I'm part of this process of defining, of prioritizing, of ideating, of whatever it might be, and I have a voice in the room to whatever extent I want. There's going to be people like, cool, I'll just listen to the rest of the people throw out ideas and I'll watch and see what happens. At least I consume the why, even if I'm not part of the, challenging the why. But when I leave that room or when I go on the court or whatever my thing is next, I get it. I know exactly why. I understand the problem. I understand the solution we put together. I understand why everybody's doing their thing. And now I know when I go do my job, I trust that my team's doing the right thing. I trust the leaders are pulling the right direction. And I know that my role in this organization is valued, regardless whether I'm at the very top or the very bottom of the org. I know that when I grab on the rope, I'm pulling it the same direction everybody else is. And I feel really, really happy the way that we're pulling it and my position in the line of pulling the rope. And I go home, I'm like, yeah, good day, good stuff. And tomorrow, I can't wait to get back and we're going to go win. And we're going to win as a team.
So this is a little bit of an aside. It reminds me of a story where, God, I can't even remember where I heard it, so I'm not going to do it justice. But the notion was a couple of guys, maybe guys and gals who used to work at a summer camp, years and years ago when they were kind of teenagers, were invited to come back to this camp as adults and help them kind of reboot the camp. It had really kind of fallen off, over the years, aged poorly, poor, kind of culture was what was dominating this thing. It was impacting the business. And the story goes, hey, they invited these kind of, former employees back. And as they are getting things started with how they are going to rebuild this summer camp, one of the things they started doing as they're walking around the camp, Monday through Sunday, observing what the counselors were doing with the kids and in the canoes rowing and all that sort of stuff, is with their clipboards, they started to identify counselors who were doing what they believed were great things with the kids, with something that nobody saw, an interaction that they valued. Maybe they cleaned up a thing, or maybe they helped celebrate a win over here with the kid. And they just wrote on a Post-it on their clipboards like, hey, great job, I see you, signed it, boom, and just put a Post-it note on that particular counselor's clipboard. And initially, right, it's super weird. Counselors were like, what is this? But they just kept doing it. And the point is, some beat of time goes by before you know it, you see, some counselors see others that have a whole bunch of Post-it notes on their clipboards, these colored notes. And they're like, well, what are all those? Well, I don't know. I got them, from so-and-so who's now running the camp. Well, how do I get one of those? Suddenly, these little Post-it notes become this very visible signal of what kinds of behaviors are being rewarded by the organizations. What kind of behaviors and decision making is being seen and acknowledged. And ultimately, here's this little, kind of cultural totem that I'm putting on your clipboard for you to carry around as a counselor. And slowly, drip by drip over time, it starts to influence the behaviors of the others. So I realize that's like a bit of an aside, but I think the point I'm trying to make in all that is, as somebody who's trying to architect culture, the signals you put into the world matter a lot. And some of them probably exist today, whether you know it or not. So there's an exercise in taking stock of those. But there's also work to be done around what additional things could we be doing that signal to the others, in air quotes here, how we do things around here, or the way we celebrate certain things around here. Are we being intentional with that? What are the signals we could or should be creating and sharing within our teams or organizations or whatever?
No, I think it's there. And maybe one of the things too that comes out of that, and for those listening too, it's not just whoever the leader is whose job it is to make all this work, right? Like, I mean, that starts there for sure, because you have to kind of show that that's important to the leader, to the organization. This matters to us. Like we are going to put things in place that enable these connections to happen, right? These moments, these these collaborations that my team to succeed. And yet it's not just the leader, right? Like there's leaders within the group as well. Your story kind of reminds me of, there's a bunch of these out there, but on the Portland Trailblazers, Damian Lillard's kind of famous as being like, oh, this culture leader in an organization. And he's kind of well known for, like, a new person come to the team and they're like, start griping about their minutes or something. And Dame would just say, hey, we don't do that around here. That's not what we do. Like we all show up, we play, we do our part, we do the best we can, but we certainly don't complain that we think our time should come from someone else. And you need those people on your team too, right? The ones, whether it's a new ingredient to the petri dish, right? You have something, a new thing has been introduced, an outsider, a new member of the team. Maybe you've added or expanded into, you're working with another group or whatever it might be. Things are kind of humming, and now there's a disruption somehow to the culture, right? Which is like, oh, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I want this, or I need this, or I'm going to do this. And have the rest of the team be like, whoa, hold on. Actually, the way we do things here is like this. And it really works for us. And here's how you can be part of that, by doing it this way, and not waiting for the leader to make that happen or course correct inside of a meeting or whatever, where the rest of the team is taking responsibility there too, which is like, we have created this culture together and we value it, and we're going to kind of defend it as well, right? In a positive way. Let's help somebody understand why we do the things we do, why it works for us, and open the door to be like, yeah, share your thoughts about like why you think things might be different. And we'll either incorporate it or we won't. But it helps the rest of the team be like, immediately address the fact that here's how we do things. And we've strengthened that muscle to the point now where the whole rest of the team recognizes it when there's a disruption in the culture. And it's not that we pounce on the outsider. It's the, hey, this is how we do things here. It's working for us like crazy. We all love working here because of that. And we want you to be part of that too. And here's how you can do that. And it's not that it has to come from the CEO or the VP of whatever, or the coach or all that. It can also be on the team, right? Which is like, hey, we value what we've put together here, and we want to grow it and make it stronger. And if we see anything that's kind of weakening that culture, we're going to kind of rally around that and say, we're not going to try and get rid of the new addition, right? But it is let's make sure you understand why we do this stuff the way we do it, so that you can do it the same way. And now you can help us keep pulling and going faster and faster.
You certainly shouldn't be in a position where your expectation as a member of a team is that it is the job only or solely of leadership to define that kind of cultural edge consistently over time. In fact, it is absolutely the responsibility of the team to model the behavior. Because when you talk about, Damian Lillard, that's what I'm hearing in that story is, one, we're acknowledging that the signals that we send to the people around us matter as it communicates, how we do things around here, our culture. But those signals, the ultimate goal is to have those behaviors be modeled by the group. That, of course, it's the job of leadership to do some of the stuff we've been talking about maybe over the last 20 minutes, like placing value on this topic of culture as a whole, helping people see that we're doing it on purpose because it tends to up the odds of us being able to do big things, achieve our goals, deliver successful, results in the thing. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah. And I think there's another side of this, which I think is important to address, which is that if you're building a culture in a positive direction, or you have one, and you do have a disruption to your culture somewhere, a new person, a new group's been added, whatever else it might be, or maybe an existing member of the team even starts to deviate from that. There's an attempt to like, hey, wait, our culture is this, like, this is how we do things this way for a reason. The rest of the team's embracing this, but you're not embracing this for whatever reason. There's times where you have to, it's very, very important. And this goes to the leadership, but also to the team a little bit, to make sure that they're calling it out. But if you have something that's starting to turn a positive culture into a negative culture, or even the potential is there, it's really important to address that immediately, even if it means somebody has to go. Because one of the worst things you can have is an evolving culture, if you have a few pieces that just aren't in line with the culture, and it's always, there's creating conflict somewhere, and there's and the transparency's there, the communication's there, but it's just the behavior's not changing. The people who were bought into the culture will start to question whether or not we're headed in the right direction, because we're allowing this culture disruption to continue. If you're really not careful, what can happen is the people who were the ones that were really championing your culture and making things work will say, okay, the rest of the organization doesn't really understand how disruptive this is to our culture, and they're just letting it continue to go on, no matter what we've done to try and address it. Maybe I should go. And then maybe the other person who was your big culture champion is like, this doesn't feel right anymore. I think I should go. Very soon, your culture has now become the very thing that you were trying to avoid because you let it stay so long that the disruptive ingredients of your culture have become your culture. It became toxic really fast. And it can be one of the hardest things as a leader or as a team member to acknowledge that we have an ingredient in our petri dish that is creating a negative culture, and we got to do something about it. The petri dish is a fun example, and it's kind of funny to talk about it in the scope of work because I think a lot of times people feel like maybe my job does feel like I'm working a petri dish, but it's important that culture element, right? Positive culture, negative culture, that very often even a leader who's fully aligned with the culture, fully aligned with the team, everybody's rowing in the right direction, and all of a sudden you got somebody in the boat who's trying to row the other way, and the person who's leading and the rest of the team is just like, we'll just row harder. Like, okay, we can counter that negative thing that's happening. And everybody's just kind of ignoring that's there. And then next thing you got two people in the boat trying to row the other way. And then all of a sudden you got people on the right are rowing one way and people on the left are rowing the other. And okay, here we go. We're just going in circles now. And we've made this is bad. If you don't take action right away or as soon as you can, don't let it fester in the petri dish. You got to move. At some point, if you've invested in culture, whether you're growing it and it's given all the positive signals that you could have, or you have it and you're trying to maintain it, defending that becomes pretty important. And it's a fine line between, oh, this is like a clique, right? Like, oh, this group, these people all have known each other forever, they've worked together forever, and they just don't like anything new, right? Like that can, you got to be careful that you don't wander too far into that lane. But I do think it's important that you address toxicity or culture disruptions quickly and with purpose, because the rest of the teams will be like, oh, everybody acknowledged that this wasn't working. We did our best to solve the problem. It didn't work. We have to extract that from the team. We need new blood that understands the culture, is willing to go with us, or the whole thing can fall apart before you ever make it to the goal in the first place.
That's so funny because I am reminded that you and I have at times in our careers, we have occupied marketing roles, and we've always sort of had a hand in shaping marketing oriented things, for lack of a better word. But we've participated in the function of marketing in many different instances. And I hear you describe that type of guardrail, which totally agree, 100% spot on. Defending against the cancerous agents that can take a great thing and make it a bad thing pretty quickly is so important. But what it reminds me of is essentially something that I always end up rolling up under a marketing umbrella, which is the importance of, if you've made a promise, keeping the promise. And when you've made that kind of cultural promise, either explicitly or implicitly by virtue of the way you behave in the organization, this is how we do things. See how we operate? We celebrate the person who raised their hand in the meeting and asked why. That's how and then you break that promise. It has real impact. Just like it would for a brand or a product or a service that has built the brand by consistently showing up in the world, delivering on their promise, or at least the perception of the promise, when suddenly one day they don't, and the ramifications of that. So those are sort of analogous in my own head. It just reminds me that the topic of culture straddles many different areas of our lives as people. Clearly, you and I have been talking about it in the context of work and professional life and some of these things, but nothing we've said is dramatically different in concept or scope if you wanted to look at the world of hip hop, let's say, and talk about culture. It's the same thing. People like us do things like this. Culture in the world of hip hop means we look for the signals in our community for people who identify as being in and around this area. What do we wear? How do we talk? Well, what are we into right now? What's our historical record? What's part of the canon of our world of hip hop? What words do we use? What's the language? Those are the kind of totems of signals that we put out into the world. And really quick, I mean, I see it in music all the time. When the brand of an artist or a band or a musician is a thing, it's almost always because they have made a cultural promise to their fans, to the audience, about how they show up in the world. And sometimes you see those folks break those promises and deviate from what the brand was supposed to represent in and around their community in that kind of cultural moment, and it has real ramifications. So I just think it's really interesting to poke at culture from those other areas, because what we're talking about isn't just a force, an invisible force like gravity or whatever, that can help us build and deliver better work. It's also a force that drives an enormous amount of how we operate in the world and how we decide to take action on any particular thing, how we move through the world, right? It's how we see the others. It's how we see the people that we gravitate towards. I mean, my family is, we're huge Philadelphia Phillies fans. I'm pumped when I'm walking through the airport and I see somebody wearing a Phillies hat. And I just sort of get that little silent nod. Hey, well, I see, like, I mean, there is a cultural signal saying, okay, hey, people like us, yeah, we got you. Go Phils. Like that means something that has value. Those same mechanics are at play every time we go to work or we sit down behind our computer to go do our one-on-one work or build our personal project or whatever. And the more we can put energy on designing for what that culture should and could be for ourselves, seems to have enormous potential to unlock value on the other end. Sorry, that's me trying to put a wrap around a lot of what I think I'm just hearing here.
No, I think it's there's so many analogies, and I think we've covered quite a few of them. I'll add one more, which I don't know, may or may not be some kind of a hot take here, but like if you look at as an example of if you have a band and you've got a drummer, bass, lead guitar, singer, and a couple of guys write songs, and everybody's like, that's my thing. I love playing the drums. I love playing guitar. I like playing bass. I like to sing. And a couple like, hey, I like writing songs. Like, nah, that's not for me. Okay, cool. And then away you go. And maybe you're the Rolling Stones or whatever, right? Like, okay, we've been doing this for 40, 50 years and we're just still crushing it because we do the thing that we're good at. We collaborate at what we do and we chase the successes we want to chase. We go achieve those things. And on the flip side, you might have, let's say, NSYNC. Let's go take a bunch of people who seem to be pretty talented. We're going to manufacture a band and we're going to put a bunch of marketing around it and we're going to make hits. And then pretty soon you're like, well, maybe Justin Timberlake's too good. Like maybe he needs to be a star and everybody else wants to be a star too. And you're like, well, this isn't going to work out. So this is over and the superstar is ejected and away they go and everybody else gets left behind because maybe they wanted to be the superstar, right? And not to, prescribe that, but it happens a lot in our culture, right? Is we look around, you look at the groups, you look at the teams, you look at the successes out there, and you say, when we look at culture, a lot of it really comes down to, are people in the right roles and in the roles that make them happy? And do they understand those roles? And do they understand why they're doing the thing that they're doing? And does that make them happy to do that? And if it does, longevity is probably in the cards, right? Like that's gonna work, right? It's when people feel undervalued, when they feel like they're playing out of position, when they're asked to do things that they don't enjoy or that they're not good at, and they don't understand why they're doing it in the first place. You do not have a culture that's going to produce victories. You have a culture, it's probably a negative culture. And it's probably one that makes people feel bad at the end of the day instead of feeling good at the end of the day. And I would certainly encourage anybody who goes home feeling kind of bad at the end of the day or dreads going to work in the morning is take a pretty hard look at, well, how's my team even constructed here? And like, do we even understand why we're doing this? And like, why am I doing the thing I'm doing? Why are my teammates on the left and right doing the things they're doing? And does leadership project and help us understand that? And are we collaborative in what we're doing? And do I feel like purpose and value? If you don't, there's many ways to change it. And it's not just plug in a bunch of A talent and tell everybody what they're shooting at and go, because it almost never works.
Yeah, it sounds like we've made a case. At least you and I have been attempting to make a case here, which is an easy case to make for people like you and I. We've spent a lot of time over investing, I think, in building culture and placing value on culture in places that we've been. We're certainly making the case for culture to not be this fuzzy, amorphous, totally BS thing that an organization should either completely ignore that it exists, or they think they're checking off the box and doing their job building culture because they put a ping pong table in this one room, right? Or there's like a sweet coffee machine over here. And therefore we checked off the culture box. It's all great because we got a ping pong tournament that happens once a month. That none of those things are what we're describing here. What we are trying to make the case for is that there is an enormous body of evidence that says if you invest in the structural underpinnings of allowing culture to grow, and I use the word grow, right? Because it takes time. We don't just roll into the building and be like, bang, 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 the posters are up, we painted the walls, and boom, culture. That it has to grow, that it has enormous potential to deliver real value for your team, for yourself as an individual or a creator or a builder, an entrepreneur. But to know that there are real tactical, practical things you can do tomorrow when you show up. You can choose to model the behaviors that you think are meaningful. You can choose to invest in hearing people, letting other people know that they are seen, signaling how you believe you should operate within your team or your organization, but also just deciding the way you want to be in the world. Because the way you choose to be in the world signals to the others, air quotes again, the others here, about, hey, I am people like us. Are you interested in doing things like this? That's what I do. I mean, that's how we operate. And those little incremental pieces that are the underpinnings of setting culture up to grow are things that we can do on purpose. As people who decide that they have value, if we move past that, then we go to that place of, okay, I can do it intentionally. I can apply, I can design for it. And I'm going to decide to do that tomorrow. It sounds like, at least that's certainly the case I would argue for, that that's very real. You could do that if you decided to do it. And boy, oh boy, are you sitting on just like a powder keg of value if you unlocked a healthy, thriving culture where people feel a part of something a bit larger than themselves, or at least they understand the why behind it. Oh my God. There's horsepower upon horsepower for days. That's my pitch. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. And the last thing I would add, I think, is a kind of a final point for my seat, is one lens that you can kind of apply to your teams is trust. Do I trust my leaders? Do I trust my teammates? Do they trust me? If you can say yes to all that, you're probably in a growing and positive culture, right? If you can't say yes to all those things, then that's the opportunity to go unlock a lot of the things that you just talked about, right? Which is like, trust is a key ingredient in all of this, is that in order for all the role players to be successful, everyone has to trust everyone. I can't, if I'm if I'm Kobe Bryant and coach is taking me out, like, you seem a little bit tired. I'm gonna put, guy number 12 is gonna come in for you for the next 4 minutes. And Kobe's like, no, thanks, man. I'll run tired. I don't trust that guy to come in here and knock all this stuff out in my absence. I don't trust it. It's not going to work. It's a great indicator that you're probably betting on the fact that we're just going to grind it out and figure this out. And culture and positive culture and positive working culture are probably not at play if that's the kinds of reactions you get. It's like, I don't trust that guy. I'm not doing that because I don't think they're going to do a good job, or no, don't give it to Jaime. That's not going to work out, whatever. That's a great litmus test for what kind of culture you're working with right now. Is do you trust the people around you? Do they trust you? No? There's work to do. They do? Great. Hold that close. That's an important thing, and build those guardrails to ensure that continues.
That's exactly right. The all of us is way more powerful than the any of us. That's the show. I think that's the show. Look, if you're interested, Jonathan and I can both be found online. Check the show notes for links. We'd love to hear from you. If there's anything that you would love to hear more about, or you have questions about anything you've heard on the show, please drop us a note. Say hi. We love it when people say hi. This has been Slackers. I'm Jaime.
I'm Jonathan.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.